Hello, hello. Welcome to Remodelers on the Rise. I am your host, Kyle Hunt, and well, just everybody's very excited for me to be here. I may have busted out the old sound app so we can have some old school chimes and other things. It is a show. A lot of the Remodelers on the Rise shows, as of late, being the last many months, have been me with a guest, sometimes a colleague of mine, sometimes a client of mine, sometimes another remodeler with something to share. And coming up, there's a few of these where I say it's kicking it old school because this is how I have done the show a number of times, which is just me, myself, and I. So if you don't like me and you really want a guest, you might want to just click to the next podcast. But we have some good things to chat about today. If you're watching this live, let me know in the comments. Ask questions as we move along. And the title for the show today is 5 Stories from Recent Coaching Calls. So let me add two things there. Number one, stories. Facts tell, stories sell is a phrase that I've heard over the years. That also can resonate. It might be the first takeaway you have from the show. When you are sitting with a prospect, when you are sitting with a potential client, to share stories versus just facts. Tell the story of how that previous client of yours decided on the countertop. Tell stories of how your process works. And when you're working with your team, share more stories. And I got that phrasing and that emphasis from a guy named Jim Rohn. He's a professional development guy back in the day. And I remember seeing a video of his saying, we have to tell more stories. And it always stuck with me. And I wrote on here from recent coaching calls. A good chunk of the work that I do, you might be thinking, Kyle, what do you do all day? Well, I'd say 50% of my work revolves around one-on-one coaching. Another chunk is podcasts and marketing. Another chunk is group-based work that I do with the VIP club. Another chunk are courses. Another chunk is fill in the blank. But a lot of my work is working one-on-one with remodelers. And I just pulled some recent stories that some of my clients have been working through and implementing and succeeding with and struggling with. And I was going to share them with you today. That's the outline for the show. Might not get specific with each of these people because several of them are revolving around financials and that type of stuff. But my goal with today's show is to hopefully encourage and motivate you in one area or another. So that chime designates we're moving from one section to the next. So we're going to get into story number one, which is titled Charging More. It is titled Charging More. And for those of you watching the video version of this, I currently have pulled up on my screen a simple little spreadsheet. And the reason I have this spreadsheet pulled up is just to talk about this topic of charging more. With this client, we were looking hard at their overall profit and loss statement. We were looking at it for last year. We were looking at how it's shaping up for this year. And in particular, as we study it, we don't have really too much of a concern with total income, other than, frankly, in his case, it's a little bit higher than really what it needs to be. He's really, really pushing to increase total income at the detriment of a lot of stress. In his case, the big challenge, and I made up these numbers, his numbers are a little different, but in his case, the big challenge for him is his cost of goods sold percentage and dollars, but percentage is too high and his gross profit is too low. He needs to increase his gross profit, not only the dollars, but the percentage of gross profit. So what you're seeing on the screen in the first little column there, and let me actually just hide this other one. And if you're watching live, again, give me a like, toss a comment or two, question as we go along. What you're seeing in this first little section here is he has $2 million of income coming in. He has cost of goods sold, everything related to producing that project, of $1.5 million. That comes out to 75% cost of goods sold percentage. And it's leaving him with a gross profit of $500,000 or 25%. That 25% there is a gross profit margin. That is a margin number. The way you get that 25% is you take your total gross profit dollars divided by your total income, and that spits out the gross profit margin. Margin is different than markup. A story for another day. Ooh, and somebody just clicked a like. Hey, Matt Stevenson, how you doing? Good. And then we have overhead expenses. In his case, $400,000 comes out to about 20% of his total income, leaving him with a net profit of $100,000, or I was going to say measly, but that's kind of annoying. Measly. Let's say a measly net profit of 5%. And hopefully, as you guys look at your P&Ls, a lot of times your owner's salary is already in overhead expenses. In this case, he has a nice salary that's coming out of there, but it's leaving him with a pretty mediocre, is maybe a good word, net profit. So how do we drive up the gross profit percentage? So I put another couple fields over here, and I just changed it to say, hey, instead of 75% cost of goods sold, we've got it down to 68%, which has increased his gross profit from 25% up to 32%. And in dollars, in this case, it's increased his gross profit dollars by $140,000. His overhead expenses are still staying the same, and his net profit has increased that $140,000 up to 12%. In his case, what he needed to hear loud and clear on the coaching call is, you need to stinking charge more. In his case, he did not need to keep pushing total income. His total income is for the team he's got and for the workload and for what he has coming in sales-wise is pretty solid. He needs to charge more for the work that he is signing. And a lot of that has to do with head trash that he has that says he can't charge more. A lot of that has to do with kind of the way he's structuring, the way that he's pricing things. Again, a story for another day, not necessarily needing to go into right now, but he just bottom line needs to charge more. If he is doing it based on volume-based markup, he needs to increase his markup from 33%, which is what the equivalent of a 25% gross profit margin is, up to a 47%. Needs to bring it up 7 points of margin. Because in that case, he is going to have a solid net profit. He's going to have some more reward for the hard work and blood and sweat and tears that he's putting into this. So that's kind of story number one, is sometimes we have to look at it and we just have to say, doggone it, I need to charge more. That's one part of the equation. Another part is looking very closely at your expected versus actual on each of your projects. Are you paying close attention to your job costing? Paying close attention to what you're spending in overhead expenses and what is included in there. And also maybe setting a goal for net profit. Do you have a goal that you have set for net profit this year? Sometimes having that marker to shoot for is very helpful. And as he looks at making this change, part of that coaching call was just building clarity that he needs to. And secondly, starting to build some confidence that he needs to. When I got off the phone with him this morning, I said, I haven't asked you this. Are you any good at remodeling? Are you actually decent at producing and creating and doing the work? And I said it tongue in cheek because I already knew he was really solid. And he said, yeah, we're stinking really good. Our clients really, really value what we do. And the outcome is rock solid. We give them a really strong process. And I said, that's good. Now, what you have to realize is you are undercharging for the excellence that you are producing, for the experience you're producing. You are a steal. Stop being such a steal and charge more, because you're worth every penny. So sometimes it's just a confidence change. Sometimes it is, doggone it, I look at the overall financials and I see where I don't have enough gross profit percentage and gross profit dollars, and I need to turn that dial up. There's a lot of different ways to slice it, but that story is kind of that client story and the outcome of that. I don't know what your takeaway is from that, other than maybe you look closely at your gross profit percentage. You look closely at what you're expecting in gross profit versus what you actually are. Maybe you just flat out know you need to charge more, and you go into your estimates right now and start increasing that and improving how much gross profit you're expecting on each project. Get out there and charge more. You're worth it. Chime. That means we're done with story number one. And we're moving on to story number two. 5P, proper preparation prevents poor performance. I created, look at these beautiful, beautiful sticky notes I created today. Those two are done. We're moving on to the next one. The next story, number two, is about weight on shoulders. Weight on shoulders. Hey, Jake Armstrong, I see that little like out there. Thank you. And we also have some comments. Hey, AK Dylan, he just hit me with a hallelujah, brother. And I think he's writing that because I was preaching about charging more. Thank you for watching on YouTube, AK Dylan. If you have questions as we're moving, as you're watching this, feel free to type them in. So number 2 is weight on shoulders. Weight on shoulders. It's a phrase that I've been thinking about a lot lately. If you are responsible for the majority of things going on in your business, that is a lot of weight. Just a lot of weight. Toss on all the sales work, all the estimating work, the material ordering, the production management, client interactions. If you have all of that on your shoulders, that's a lot to carry on your shoulders. And as you kind of start to build your team, as you add in an office manager, maybe you add a production manager, maybe you add a selections coordinator or a project manager assistant type, maybe you add somebody to help with marketing. As you add each person, you're able to take some of that weight off your shoulders and kind of hand it off to that team member. They got good shoulders, they can handle some weight, they can handle some responsibility, but all of a sudden your load is a little lighter and their load is still reasonable, but it's something that they're taking on some of that load and responsibility. I was talking to one of my clients, it was a week or two ago, because I've been talking about this weight on shoulders for a while, and that analogy just came to mind. I'm like, dude, I can see it in your face. I can see it in what you're saying to me. You have too much weight on your shoulders. You need to take some of that off. We need to figure out how to take weight on your shoulders and put it on to some of your team members. And it just kind of, I saw when I said it that it kind of connected with him, and it really connected with me. I've been using it a lot lately. So I don't know exactly what that means for you who is watching or listening to it, to this, but what is some weight that is on your shoulder? What is a responsibility that's on your shoulders that you need to dish off to somebody else? For some of you, you already have team members and you need to evaluate their workload and how much they're carrying to see if they might be able to take on a little bit more. For some of you who don't have any team member, remember, I think I typed a piece of content related to weight on shoulders, and I remember seeing one of the comments say, well, I don't have any team members, so I just have to keep grinning and bearing it. Perhaps. But what about a virtual assistant? What about somebody that can come in for 8 hours a week to help you with something? What about finding an outsourced bookkeeper for $292 a month that can take some of that weight off your shoulders? Think simple, think creative, think small. Think of that retired guy who would be happy, or gal who would be happy to go and do some material runs for you. Get creative with it. You have too much responsibility on your shoulders. Is the answer that you're just going to bear down and just work harder and harder and harder? A lot of times that's not the best answer. Sometimes that's needed and necessary. Other times we need to think a little bit differently and figure out how to take some weight off shoulders. Two recent examples. One of my clients just hired a selections coordinator. It's a super interesting position. This is a position where we're trying so hard to get a lot of upfront design and planning and specifications and final selections made before they even hit the final contract signing. That's why we charge for design and project development. By the way, I've got a great course on charging for design and development. If you go to remodelers on therise.com and click on self-guided courses, click on that one about charging for design and development. It's really good. It'll walk you step by step right through how to improve/implement that into your business. But we work hard to do that. He hired the selections coordinator, and quote unquote, she is a freaking superwoman. Freaking superwoman, quote unquote. I wrote it down on my sticky note. See it? It's right there. Freaking superwoman. And what he's saying there is, holy cow, hitting the ground running. I introduced her to this client. Boom. She's got the selection list. She's working through it. She's great with communication. She's on top of it. She's detail oriented. It's been awesome. That's one example. Another client who's got kind of a project manager assistant/selections coordinator, making a huge impact and kind of being the glue to finally pull things together. Another client, he may have been one of the ones that clicked the like earlier, who hired an office manager 3-4 months ago. Night and day difference in how his business is feeling. There is weight off, and Jake, I'll use your name. There's weight off of Jake Armstrong with Revive Properties shoulders, and it is on his office manager, Kelsey. She's taking things on that he used to be responsible for, and she's doing it well / some of those things just better and more consistently. which is freeing Jake up to work on more valuable work slash just enjoy not having as much weight on the shoulders. So I'm hoping the takeaway from this, or the question that you kind of consider, is how are you going to remove some weight from your shoulders? What are you going to do to remove some weight for your shoulders? What is an example of quote unquote weight that is on your shoulders that you need to take off your shoulders? Type it in the chat box if you would. Okay. So that's kind of story number 2, is to consider that, how much weight you have, what those responsibilities are, and how can you dish some of them off. You can't do everything. Or some of you are trying to do everything and you're only doing it mediocrely. Yes, that's a word. I learned it in elementary school. Mediocrely. It's a beautiful word. I think I made it up. Okay. Oh, somebody thought that was mediocrity. They thought that was kind of funny. We got some laughter here. But that chime meant we're done with story number 2 and we're moving on to story number 3. Story number 3 is from one of my clients out east, and he has a kick butt lead carpenter. Been with him for 4 or 5 years. He can really set him up with a proper pre-construction meeting and really set him up, introduce him to the client. And this lead carpenter is doing what I would consider a lead carpenter to be responsible for. Yes, he's still swinging the hammer half the time, maybe a little bit more than half the time. He's also making sure all the materials are ordering and delivered. He's lining up the trade partners and communicating that. He is responsible for the overall project schedule. And he is the main point of contact between the client and the company. Just a really solid, true lead carpenter. People define that maybe a little bit differently, but oftentimes that's kind of the quintessential definition of a lead carpenter. Okay. And the business is growing to the point where hiring and having a true project manager who can oversee 2 or 3 lead carpenters, who can take on the full overall production management of the company, is starting to become necessary. This is the production management work is still very much the weight that is on the shoulders of the owner of the company, and he needs to take that weight off so that he can be doing, number 1, just less work, and number 2, really focus in and do a better job on the sales, on the marketing, on the estimating, and just overall reviewing financials and just leading his company. It's an exciting point in his business. It takes a lot of work and effort to get to that point, right? If you're a modeler and you all of a sudden get yourself out of the field and you get a carpenter or 2, you get some additional trade partners, you might hire an office manager, you get some things going to get to the point where you can hire a true production manager, is a very exciting point. Now, when I'm walking through this with this client, Jake just said need help with managing the project. So that's kind of on Jake's radar as far as the next weight to take off his shoulders. And knowing Jake and knowing his business, I would agree with that. Okay. So when we're talking about moving from a lead to a project production manager, there's 3 things that kind of come up early in the conversation. Number 1, how are you going to replace that person on the production side? Oftentimes, if you are promoting a lead into that PM role, or that side of things, that's usually kind of your ace carpenter, your all-star, your stud or studette. And so that's one question to ask, is how are we going to be able to take the tool belt off of that person and still keep production moving? And oftentimes that means we are hiring a new lead carpenter or moving somebody up into that lead carpenter role before that production manager, that project manager, is rolling into their new position. So that's something that always comes up. That's number 1. Number 2 that comes up is, how do we pay for them? This is something that when I'm coaching with clients is a question that I ask point blank, right square to their face. How are you going to afford this? This is moving into something where it is going to cost you more as a business. Whether you put this production manager in your overhead expenses, whether you put them as a cost of goods sold, that we can debate. The bottom line is your projects are going to need to have some more gross profit in them, or some more cost in them, in order to pay for this. So we think about, how are we going to pay for it? Can we afford to take on this $70, $75, $82, $87,000 a year cost plus add on some taxes to that salary, add on some other benefits? How are we going to pay for it? Okay. So we really think through that. Does that mean we need to change our markup? Does that mean that we need to change that project manager line item in our proposal? Have we started to do that for the last 3, 4, 5 months? So we already are pricing our projects to kind of accommodate this. If we went back to that spreadsheet that I had up earlier, if let's say the project manager or production manager is going into the overhead expenses, if my overhead expenses are going up $75,000, I either need to increase my gross profit and my markup and how much I'm making on the project. I need to increase my total sales. Maybe it's a combination of those, but we really need to think through, and you need to be able to say, here's how I'm going to afford and pay for this position. And also, do you have some good strong cash position in case, because it's going to take a little bit of time to get them going. And then the third thing, after number one, how do you replace their production? Number two, how are you going to pay for them? The third one is just getting down to timing. Is there a perfect time to make that change? Usually there's not a perfect time, but oftentimes we have to kind of really put a line in the sand and say, all right, here's kind of our goal here. By this date, this is when we are going to work to make this transition. Now, what needs to happen between now and then to make that happen? Timing oftentimes is something that we really look hard at and consider. And I have found is if we put an actual deadline on it, that helps push things along. It happens too often where we might have a conversation with this key employee and say, hey, this is the direction we want to go. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, you've been hustling and you haven't talked about it at all. And that employee goes, hey, remember when we talked about this? Everyone works better off of deadlines. And by setting a deadline, you really have to be thoughtful about the steps to get you from where you are to that transition. Okay. So that's story number 3 is kind of how we think about maybe hiring that new position. Frankly, that kind of step by step can be applied to a lot of different positions in our business. Ding. So that's one thought. And then a little side note to that. I have seen over the last year example after example of people sliding into a project manager or production manager role who don't have a lot of field experience. Oftentimes I've been seeing that they're women that have been falling into this role, but the soft skills of project management is where they are excelling. They are very solid with attention to detail. They understand how to set up, adjust, work, schedule. They know how to motivate people to get people to show up on time. They're very detailed with thinking through selections and all the material side of things. They're good with interacting with a client, keeping them upbeat, keeping the team upbeat. Your project manager, 75, and I'll go even higher, 78% of their job, I'm even feeling more frisky. 82% of their job are all of those soft skills. A project manager, there's a lot of those soft skills. I'll give 18, 20% towards actual field experience. Between yourself, other people on the team, that field experience will take care of itself. And if they're sharp, they'll start figuring out, okay, this is the sequence that a project happens. Okay, we need to be more proactive next time with that. Man, those soft skills when it comes to the project manager, production manager is incredibly valuable. And I think oftentimes we have that flip-flopped. We think 80% of the value of the project manager and the results are going to be, well, they got to have 80% of it be field knowledge. The other 20%, yeah, we can train them up on detail-oriented using technology, communication. It's the other way around. Wow, people agree with it. People agree with it, folks. Okay. Number four, another story just from recent coaching calls. Another story. What have we covered so far? We talked about charging more, talked about weight on shoulders, talked about moving a lead to a PM, plus a little bonus one on that. Number 4 is your ideal business. Your ideal business. I made a post about this morning because I have been thinking about it for my own business. And this is a question that I pretty consistently talk to my clients about. Okay, this is how your business is going right now. Like, where are we going with this? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to achieve in your business? What kind of work-life balance, work-life integration? What do you want this to look like? Do you want to work 60 hours a week, but doing more of stuff that you like to do? Do you want to work 40 hours a week? How much time do you want to take off? What do you want to, what weight do you want on your shoulders? What responsibilities do you want? There's a lot to consider. And I think oftentimes we just kind of go with the flow, and it is what it is, and there's work to be done, and we don't think strategically and check in strategically on how we're doing as far as the business supporting our lives and our lifestyle versus the business just consuming our lives. There's somebody else is going to say hallelujah, Kyle, on that one, like that comment earlier. So your ideal business, what's working, what's not working. We need to step back, peer out the window, and kind of consider that and think about that. I've been thinking about it for my business, where there's only so much capacity that I have. There's revenue goals that I have. There's things that I really love doing. That might not be leveraged time for me, or might not be the most profitable things. Balancing all of that and continuing to evaluate it is very, very key. And I was doing a mastermind call with colleagues of mine. So I'm in a couple different mastermind groups, just to talk about my business and to get together with smart people. And one of the people in the group yesterday said, she works 30 to 35 hours a week in her coaching business. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That's way less than I do. I'd say, if I really think about it, I mean, I take a good amount of time off throughout the year. I do a pretty good job of that, but I'd say on average, 42, 45, 48, 50. If I started really adding up a little bit of email in the morning, a little bit of email in the evening, this and that, I'm probably pushing 45, 50. I work hard. And I thought to myself, what would need to change in order for me to have 35 to 40 hours worth of work? I'd have to be pretty strategic about it. I would have to be saying no to certain things. I would have to continue to take some weight off my shoulders and put it on my team's shoulders. I might have to not take on so many things all at once. I need to continue to be smart about reducing the noise in my inbox, so I'm not having constant emails to sift through and all of that. There's things that I can do to prune that down. And for me, that's really important, because I'm not doing well at working out. And that's important to me. I would like to read more. I would like to have more quiet time in the morning related to my faith. I would like to just not have that little bit of pressure of responding to emails or feeling a little behind on emails, throughout the year. So we have to think about, what does our ideal business look like, and how do we move towards that direction? Will we ever arrive at it? Probably not. But will we move towards it? And can we continue to move towards it? Yes. So, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you? And I think for me, just a very practical one, you probably noticed if you're watching the video. Yesterday, I worked out. First time in a while. I just said one of my goals is to work out. Talking to my buddy Terry down the hall. He's been going to Orange Theory, which is there's a lot of franchises of those around the country. And Terry's been going twice a week. Dude looks good. He looks sharp. He looks fit. He does some other things in between too. But I'm like, hey, all right, he's doing that. And I took that from that conversation. I literally came back to my office. He's 2 doors down. And I pulled up Orange Theory's website. I clicked, I entered my information in there. And then it said, all right, when do you want to schedule your first appointment? And I went, crap. I take the kids and drop them off at school in the morning. My wife kind of does the pickup at the end of the day. We've got volleyball in the evening on Tuesday and Thursday. We got church choir on Wednesday. My wife's got choir on Monday. When am I going to do this? And I booked my first appointment for 8:45 a.m. on a Monday. And it was weird, because I'm supposed to be working from 8:45 to 9:45 on a Monday morning. I love working from 8:45 to 9:45. But I did it because that was kind of the only gap. And I had a tremendous day yesterday. I was way more productive. I felt great. My focus was better all day. And I looked and I said, all right, I'm going to try to book 2 per week. And the only other time this week that works is tomorrow morning at 8:45. I moved my meeting with Rob Bartashevitz. Shout out to Bailey Construction. We moved that to next week, and I'm doing another one tomorrow. We have to make time, because my ideal business allows me to work out a couple times during the week without necessarily directly impacting my ability to be dad and husband, and really impacts. That's important to me at this stage in life. We got too much going on. So I need to figure out how to build my business around that additional variable. So keep thinking about that. Keep thinking about that. How do you move toward, number one, what does your ideal business look like? What responsibilities do you have or not have? And how do we move towards more of an ideal business for you? Chime. All right. So that was the fourth story. And then the fifth story, progress, then setback. Progress, then setback. I thought for a minute when I typed in THEN, wait a minute. Is it supposed to be THEN or THAN? And I went with THEN. Bailey happens to be in New York City having fun, so she is not watching this live, or else she would say, Kyle, you are correct. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I've got a college degree. Progress then. Not then. Yeah, I'm confident. Final answer. Progress, then THEN setback. And this was from one of my clients who I've been working with for the last month and a half or so. And she is making drastic improvements. She is understanding her numbers much stronger. She is instantly charging more, and she's landed a few projects at a higher gross profit margin, which in her case is very, very, very important. She's watching her job costing better. She's improved her project scheduling. She has improved some of her sales follow-up, just a lot of improvements. And when we're making progress, or when we're going about our business, we make progress and then we're always going to run into some kind of setback. In her case, she quoted a project that had a lot of this aluminum railing, that it's an outdoor deck, a lot of aluminum railing, a provider, a vendor that she's never used before, sent over the dimensions, set over the prints. The vendor sent back a price. She took that price, plugged it into her estimate, and then only to find out after signing the work that that was just kind of a preliminary thing, and we didn't factor in this, and we didn't factor in that, and there's about $7,000-8,000 of cost that is going to be needed in order to purchase the railing and all the different pieces of it. Hard lesson learned, kind of a shady vendor. It was a weird situation, but bottom line is she's been making progress, and that's a stinking setback. That is a kick to the proverbial nether regions. You understand what I'm saying? That is a kick in the rear. That is a kick wherever. It just hurts. And I think it's important that when we have setbacks, when we are licking our wounds, we need to get back up and keep pushing forward. You know, that I've seen it on Facebook a lot, where it's like, what we think success is going to look like, and it's just this nice steady rise. You know, but if you're a remodeler on the rise, let's say, you know what's going to look like? It's going to look like a little progress, then a little dip, and then a progress, then a little twirly twirl, then a little progress, then a little dip. But when you look back at it in the 12 to 18 to 24 to 36 month range, what you see is steady improvement. And we have to continue to realize there's lots of forward movement going on. There's lots of progress. I'm so much further along than I was 6 months ago, than I was 12 months ago. And you have to really cling to that, because you're going to get punched in the face and you're going to have setbacks. Keep pushing forward. Okay. That is today's show, my friends. That was a little around the horn of stories. Wow, the people really enjoyed it. Just 5 stories from recent coaching calls. Make sure you're telling more stories and less facts. Just tell the stories. It's more compelling. We are wired as humans to resonate with stories. Keep working on that. We talked about charging more and looked at an example of that. Weight on shoulders. Looked at moving from a lead to a project manager role. Talked about your ideal business. Talked about progress, then setback. Hopefully there's something in there that was a good nugget for you, good reminder. I thank you for listening. If you are listening to this on whatever little podcast app you listen to it on, can you give your buddy Kyle a little review? If you're listening to this on Apple, like, click on my podcast. You see where it says leave a review? Give me a little review on there. Don't just come on, push it a little bit. Don't just go there and like click the 5 stars. Type a little something. That helps. It helps more people find it, and I would appreciate it. That's all I got for today. I'll talk to you again, I bet you, next week. See ya.